All right, great. It's a pretty small space, but we're using the mics just for the lovely camera. For the flow of the evening, I'm just going to introduce myself. Jenny's going to introduce herself, talk about the show a little bit, we'll ask some questions, and then we'll have some time for audience Q&A at the end, and we'll also hear from some of the artists in the show as well. So I'm Emma, I'm the Executive Director of Union Hall. Thank you. If you haven't been in our space before, we are a nonprofit arts exhibition space that supports primarily emerging artists and curators, and that's really what we do through Rough Gems. Jess, do you mind grabbing some extra chairs? Hi. Feel free to grab those chairs and move them around if you want to.
Oh, it's okay. I'll move this for you all. I'm good. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you, Johnny. So I was just introducing myself at Union Hall. Welcome to our space. And we support emerging creatives. We also have interdisciplinary events. Our Rough Gems program, which is what we're doing right now, is an open call for emerging curators in the Denver community. And it can be one curator or curatorial teams. And it can be up to 6 artists. We're really excited about this program. This is our fourth cycle doing it. And it's been just really fun. We do 3 3-week exhibitions and are able to work with so many different curators and artists. And we pay equitable wages to everybody that we work with. And I'm just gonna thank our sponsors super quickly and then we can get into the fun stuff. Thank you to the Colorado Community Foundation. It's because of the building and all the residents that live up there that we're able to be here in this beautiful space as a nonprofit organization. So thank you to the residents that are here and those who couldn't make it tonight. Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts supports all of our programming, Colorado Creative Industries, and Bonfi Stanton Foundation is our Rough Gems sponsor, so they donate to support this program in particular. My pronouns are she, her. I should have said that. So, Jenny, if you want to introduce yourself, your pronouns, and talk a little bit about the exhibition.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Jenny, my pronouns are she, her. And, this idea really came about in collaboration. So when I say that this really belongs to everyone, it really does belong to everyone. But it started with me, Emily, and Jess, kind of in dialogue about maybe submitting a proposal for an exhibition. And we were kind of talking about, well, what do we want to do? And so it was kind of we were thinking about, these feelings of home and safety and these kind of indescribable feelings that are associated with those things. Especially coming out of COVID, it's kind of well, what does it mean to feel safe? And how do we find a counterbalance to all of these uncomfortable feelings that we've been dealing with over these past few years? And so we kind of we were sitting in this meeting and all of us were describing these feelings, but there were never really concise words to accurately convey what we were trying to touch on, right? And so that kind of that was kind of the starting point of all of that, and then it evolved from there. And there were a lot of artists that we were looking at, and a lot of artists that had inspired the that idea and our notions of that idea. So there's Summer's thesis in undergrad was about home and safety and kind of spilling her guts, And then there's there's a conversation between me and Ari about the immigrant experience and how being a descendant of immigrants kind of it defines our sense of home that's maybe different from other people. And then Jess was comfort and safety and this notion of hige and the art of cozy intimacy. And so kind of and then I was at this opening at the Evans School, and my friend and I, we saw Jenna's tampons, and we're oh, those are really pretty flowers. And I'm wait, no, those are tampons. And it was this kind of amazing moment. And I was just wow, there's something here. Those are so amazing. And so we had to include that. And then Emily, it was kind of this. Well, there's there are these protective instincts. And I don't want to speak for her, but like I think that's my interpretation of like, you know, her gate is that it's like there are these like, you know, with these feelings of safety come, you know, it's like inherent with protection, right? And so that's kind of like where the idea came from, and it like really evolved from there. And then like putting everyone together in this like collective space, it just like it grew so many different branches and ideas, and like it really became this like really complex idea with like a lot of different expressions and like a lot of different like opinions and like philosophies, and kind of like there's like so much nuance to like what each artist is saying. So like I'm gonna hand the mic off to like other artists just so they can kind of like express like what their idea was and how it relates to this overall theme. But one of the ideas that we talked about, like, and I think like we talked about this in our original meetings with like Emily and Jess, and it's kind of like, you know, there's this womb-like feeling, you know, it's kind of like this safety that we felt when we were like in our mothers, basically. And then like I saw Jenna's tampons, like, okay, yeah, that's like an expression of the womb. And then there was this conversation about like womanhood, but it's like, you know, womanhood isn't necessarily like limited to like women or like people with wombs, right? So it's like, how do we make that more inclusive? And so that's kind of where the idea of sacrum came from, or like that name sacrum, because it's like, well, we all have these protective instincts to like protect those feelings of like when we're in the womb, and like we all have, I mean, you know, we all basically have a sacrum, and so it's kind of like, it's more inclusive as an idea instead of just like, well, just women, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, so I think, you know, like I kind of want to start with like the micro idea, and that was Kimberly Bianca. So basically, like, you know, I talk about in my statement the process of neuromodulation and how like when the spinal cord develops, it really formulates a template of like how we interpret home, and that's such like a important moment in our lives is that like process. And so she basically made these like womb sounds, and then that's where the idea came from. She like made these modules on these, and you can kind of see them around the gallery, but it's like, she made these modules herself, and then she like programmed them with sounds that she recorded herself, and it's like such a cool thing. I have no idea how she actually did it, because it's like, it goes so far above like my area of expertise. And then she created this video with all these animations, and you can kind of see it over in that corner there. But it's like, she like really tied in the concept of like neurons and synapses firing, and then how that like you know, as like this baby develops in the womb, it like creates those like neurons, and then she basically like put these sound modules, whether it's like a motion activated sound module or a button, next to different artworks in the show, and she like worked with each artist and kind of like talked to them about like what kind of sound do you want to be associated with your piece, and how does that connect to like this bigger whole. So that's like very much like the micro scale, like very small. And then I think Emily has a statement that she wrote about her piece.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna like speak on behalf of Emily and what she sent us about her piece, and she couldn't be here this evening, but thought it was important to be able to convey that through her words. So her piece is it Please and Thanks?
Please say please and pearly gates.
Please say please and pearly gates. So pearly gates are the ones right at the sliding glass doors when you walk in, and please say please is the gate right at the entrance to the space. So yeah, I'll just read it word for word basically, since I think she articulates it really well. My work deals with human rights and freedom of expression and how that interfaces with power structures. In this work in particular, the idea of tone policing and the tendency of those with power to deprive people of their rights based on how polite and conforming they are. By making a metal gate, I'm exploring the concept of boundaries both physically and emotionally that creates distance and separateness between people. By invoking an aristocratic aesthetic, it speaks to the privilege it is to have boundaries enforced and creates a physical manifestation of the gatekeeping that can occur by power structures, keeping people out and away from access to spaces with material or emotional needs. And the cool thing about that piece is that all of those words, it's interactive. So you can see there's more letters on the desk, and you can take the letters off and switch them around. So there's a bunch of different ones that you can put on there. There's please say please, please and thanks, do not enter, fuck off, refer to respectability politics and tone policing. And yeah, and folks can move those around as they'd like to, and make their own boundaries, which I like how she said that. So, and in keeping with the theme Sacrum, wanted to mimic the bony structure and spinal column with the repeating metal curves. So, yeah. So that's the first work. That's Emily Zeke.
Yeah, and then I'm going to hand the microphone off to Summer.
Oh, what do you want me to say? Whatever you want.
Hi. Okay, so Jenny approached me back in the fall sometime about making some work for the show that she was doing, and I was very inspired. And my piece that's like around on the other side of there, it's like geese and stuff, it's a poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese, and that poem, and along with most of Mary Oliver's work, is very like internal and homey feelings, you know, like you can feel her words under your ribs, I think. And the other piece that I made for this show is there called Warm Cheetahs, and that was a piece inspired partially by the 3-year-old girl that I babysit every day. She would call me Summer Cheetah, and her name was Violet Cheetah. And I was inspired by her artwork and tried to imitate her kind of wild and, you know, unrestricted artistic freedom in my piece. And it feels very home-like to me, very sacred, because of the natural connection between a young child in the home. You know, you have to hope that a child has a safe home and wonderful people around to raise them. And I hope that whenever Violet Cheetah is grown up, that she'll, you know, hopefully still think that Summer Cheetah did a good job helping raise her.
Love that.
Yeah, let's see, Jenna? Jenna?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Jenna. So my pieces are the bouquet installation on my left, and then this piece on the right. And so these were inspired by these sculptures that I made that were of flowers. So they're very much modeled after flowers. That one's an iris, and then the ones on the left are kind of just sort of roses or interpretations of that. And specifically with the pieces on the left, it can kind of be arranged in different configurations. So for this show, it's put together as a bouquet, like something that kind of would be in a house or home setting. And it's kind of making a fun play on perception a little, because like Jenny said, they do look like flowers, so it's kind of got that fluffy sort of overtone where it also is a bloody tampon. And like it's kind of getting at the fact that these things, a lot of issues specifically surrounded by like gender and women's health, are getting pretty gritty these days. And so I think this piece kind of, both of them are standing to kind of expose that periods kind of suck, and people who get periods are under attack right now in a lot of situations, and people in general, it's just kind of a mess. And it's just kind of that play on perception where it's could be light, fluffy, and pretty, but it's also there's something to it, and it's something to think about and figure out. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jenna.
Let's see, Ari.
Thank you. So I was super excited when you told me about Sacrum and the concept behind it. So I made 2 pieces on fabric, or blankets, sorry. These 2 at the end. I was really inspired by the idea of being at home and snuggling under the covers, because that's like my safe space. And since COVID, I thought a lot about isolation, but also depression and nightmares and loneliness and all those things. So one of the works is more inspired by my matriarchal side from my mom, and then the other side more paternal. And so they kind of both deal with what that means to be, what home means, and what I was also thinking about ancestral memories and how that can be passed down from like parent to child and some of those things. And so that's just very general about the work, and I'm super excited. And I think the show does a really good job of kind of hitting on what it is like to be a human being, like being in, wanting to go back, because I always said that, like, send me back into the womb, get me out of this place. But so kind of being inside of that cocoon, or also being in this world that's can be volatile too. So
Yeah.
thank you for.
And then, so what is the imagery?
Yeah, so for that one, it's images. So when I was thinking about memories and ancestral memories, and so like my dad always tells me every day, every time I talk to him, he tells me about his home in Iraq, and he has these long-winded stories because he's a refugee from Baghdad as a child. But so he always tells me about what his home looks like and his house, and like, so assimilating into a new culture was always like really traumatic for him. So I kind of lived that too through him. But it's images of Baghdad or places that might be from the internet, because it's hard to have a sense of what that place would be when you can't go back to your country. So that was, but it's on a quilt, so you can see that it's heat pressed onto the fabric itself.
Yeah. Awesome,
Thank you.
And then Jess.
It's okay, I got this. Thanks anyway, I might. So I have 2 paintings from a series I started in 2022, as well as a digital painting, I suppose you could call it, around the corner here. And it all started from a series of existential crises I was having about just the ideas of like decay, deterioration, and loss that happened with these ideas of home, and home being like the home we make in our bodies, or the homes that we physically live in, even a sense of place that you can find within traveling. If these new places feel comfortable, they can be new homes, or even home as the earth, from a larger sense. So the painting series, traditional painting, hanging painting series, is called Processing Loss. And it was more a form of art therapy for me, before I started seeing a real therapist. And so I would take these National Geographic magazines and rip them up with my hands and paste them onto these comfort color canvases that I would paint with house paint, and create these sort of like geode formations. My dad's a geologist, geoscientist, so I grew up around like a lot of rocks and minerals. Yeah, thank you. He makes a lot of dad jokes, so thanks for that. Yeah, so the patterns within these paintings, Processing Loss, kind of represent like geode patterns, or cellular structures, or even geologic maps, depending on how you interpret it. And the green one behind you is processing loss ecosystem, and has imagery from like algae blooms in lakes caused by humans, bees, and even underwater life. So I'm mixing these pieces in a more abstracted sense. It was less about the photographs for me than making sense of these areas of loss that I was noticing from human, societal, and like government imposed actions. And the yellow painting around the corner is processing lost space. And it was just this kind of like somewhat manic exploration of like the human obsession with space exploration, and all the funding that goes into that, as opposed to problem solving, areas of our direct home life that are struggling, either from an environmental or societal perspective. And yeah, that's where I'm at. I still make them, so that tells you anything. So Jenny really liked the idea of having a digital piece for me, since I am a graphic designer, but then she really liked my paintings, I guess. So yeah, I don't make like paintings, drawings for people to see, as you probably figure, but I did make the digital triptych as kind of a homage to Mother Nature and home, and these feelings of comfort and protection that come from the spiritual connections that humans often have from Earth as a home. And so as I was going through these existential crises last year, I kind of frolicked over to Montana, took a little mental break, and got some really much needed peace and comfort and solitude from a little escapism. And so the presentation of one of the views from Glacier National Park was made into a digital painting in 3 parts, or what's known as a triptych, which, hello. So yeah, triptychs are originally intended to portray, so they often show up in a lot of Catholic and religious imagery to indicate like storytelling in 3 parts. And so I divided up the image in 3 pieces to represent the sacredness of my experience, which I feel like anyone who has a similar connection probably can relate to this feeling in some capacity. And then Jenny asked me about plants, and I was like, I have a lot. So I brought in a lot of my plants from home, which are all around the gallery. And yeah, I mean, it direct relation to my home, to these earthly feelings of Earth as a home, and what nature can provide for us in terms of this spirituality and solitude. So yeah.
Thanks, Jess. And Jess is also our gallery marketing manager at Union Hall. So it's awesome to see your work in the space. And now you make work for people to see. So yeah. I think it's sort of a nice segue, because I feel like there's definitely a thread throughout Jess's work, but I think with at times some of the other works as well, regarding all of the greenery you can see in the space, and I feel like there's a lot of touch points on the environment and Mother Nature and the mother, tying in the mother theme. So I just was hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit more and how that all works together, and the idea of bringing greenery actually into the space, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that Jess would talk about her plants was like there was so much love there. And I was like, okay, I have to bring them in. But it's also, there's kind of like this idea in institutional collections where you're not really supposed to have any life forms like near the collection, because it's like you don't want deterioration, you don't want pests to come in or like, you know, decompose the work or like chew through the canvas or the cotton.
Now you're stressing me out.
Right? No, and I figured it's gonna be okay in this space because Jess is like very protective with her plants.
I know.
But it's kind of this idea of bringing life into the space, and it's like sometimes like I love museums and I grew up in them, but there's kind of this like sterile and very like removed quality to them, where it's like, well, you protect the collection by like taking them out of like these environments that they were made in and making sure that they're like monitored and controlled. And it's kind of, I think that like that extraction and that like removing these, you know, these life forms from art, like is kind of a part of like this loss and this like disconnect that we have from nature. And I think that like what Jess points at, and like one of the things that like I like felt when I was looking at Jess's paintings, like why I love them, and like why, like, you know, this idea of Mother Nature is like so ingrained into like all of these works, is that the closer we get to nature, the more we heal, right? So there's kind of this like innate balance in nature, and so it's kind of like there's this tension between comfort and protection, right? And there's like, they're kind of like inextricably linked, excuse me. And the further you get from nature, the more that like link breaks down. And so it's like when you come closer to like this Mother Nature, this like nature, this like outside, like these plants, this life, you know, it kind of like represents these like feminine cycles that we go through, right? So it's like, you know, there's Jenna's tampons that represent that like, you know, literally like externalizing your sacrum. But like, you know, like you're like removing these things, and it's like you basically go through this cycle every month, and at the end of this cycle, then it's like there's this decay, right? And so it's like that decay is such an important part of life. So it's like, how do you bring that into the space and like not cut these cycles short, you know? And I think that like by embracing these cycles, you know, we get closer to our nature. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring plants into this space. And like, I'm sure, you know, I'm sure all the works will be fine, and I wouldn't bring like pests into this space.
I know, I'm just kidding.
It's like a small act of rebellion against this like really sterile quality that like I think a lot of times exists in these like, you know, traditional white cube spaces. And so it's kind of like the antithesis, like I feel like Union Hall is like almost this like antithesis, and it's experimental, and it's, you know, it's like, you know, charcoal gray walls that feel cozy, and it's like warm, and it's like there's so much connection, and there's so many connections that have been made through this space that I kind of wanted to like bring as much life into it as possible.
And I love that. I mean, I love the plants everywhere, and I think that you've created this environment. This is something that I think, yeah, we hope to create for visitors and for folks coming in here, because it is such a prevalent issue of feeling uncomfortable, the sterile nature of museums and art spaces, and it not feeling like a comforting, welcoming space. And so you've just created that through the plants, and then also through the furniture, which I guess we can like touch on as well. It just creates like this gathering space that it doesn't really exist normally in art spaces. So yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you brought in all this furniture. And can you tell me about like the thinking of having it centered in like the middle of the space?
It's kind of about angles, right? So it's like you can like sit and you can see Jenna's piece, or you can sit somewhere else and you see like Jess's and Summer's, and then you can sit somewhere else and you see Jenna's other piece. And then it's like you see Ari's like right as you walk in, which is like exactly what I wanted. And then like Emily's, you can see Emily's from like different angles. And so it's all about like making sure that like if people want to spend time in here, and like, because I really think that like the more time you spend with art, the more like unravels and like the more profound experience. And so, you know, not everyone can stand, you know, for long periods of time. So it's like I wanted people to have spaces to sit, and that was like a big part of like this idea when we like first, you know, and so I say I, but it really is like we, because it's like we really wanted to offer people a space to really like live with art, you know,
Yeah.
and to be able to like take the time to really look.
I love it. When I was in the gallery the other day, I think I told you this, there was a couple that was sitting here for over an hour just talking and being with, you know, vibing to the music and like looking at the artwork, and I think it's really cool to see that, and maybe we'll just like steal the couch, we're gonna keep it here. I think I wanted to touch on a little bit as well the diversity of mediums in the space, because I feel like there's so many different mediums that are represented in here, like everything from 2D works to textiles to digital works. So I'm wondering a little bit more about like, was that an intentional decision or something that you feel like just sort of came together that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I mean, so when Emily, Jess, and I like originally sat down, it was kind of like there was like a very strong intent. It's like we want to make sure that they're digital works, and then we want to make sure that they're paintings, and we want to make sure they're sculptures, and then Ari came in and she's like, I want to do textiles. Like, yes, and so it's kind of like it was natural, but it was also like very intentional, and I think that like the artists like really embraced the challenge too, because it's like I think there's such a specific language with each medium, and so you know, we try to pick people that really understood the language of their media and like kind of the nuance of that, and like I mean, it's like Jenna's a fantastic painter, and then it's like Ari really understands like this kind of like interwoven nature of these fabrics, and then like breaking this down and like, you know, adding different things. She like really understands that, and then it's like Emily's like an expert welder, right? And then Jess, like, you know, using house paint is like, that just like brings everything so full circle, and then like the act of like tearing these pieces and kind of like these like fissures in this like very calm space is like very emblematic of like what she's trying to say. And then it's like Summer's use of color is just like so perfect, and her freedom and like the way that she draws is like so like childlike and so pure in that sense, where it's just like this raw expression that like you can't force. It just like not everyone can do that. And so and then who am I gonna say? Oh, and then Kimberly, it's like her, like the way that like she made these modules is just incredible. I mean, I'm so blown away by that. And like the digital piece that she did that's like projected on like the angular space, I mean, it's like watching her put that together was just like mind blowing, and she really understands technology, and you know, just as like digital design, it's like there's so many like subtleties in them, and so it's kind of like it just brings, you know, it brings complexity, which is exactly what I wanted. And it's like embracing complexity, I feel like is such an important idea of like home, you know?
Yeah, because we're all multifaceted humans, but we all have to like lean into our individuality, and so I feel like that's what this show encapsulates, and it's really each person just expression of themselves and how they express themselves in its purest form. So yeah, I mean, I love having so many different mediums in the same space at the same time, and it's really exciting to have that in here, so thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
I just made this connection, but it was really like, I think in the back of our minds from the very beginning was like the root of the human experience, and the root of having our bodies as a home is sensory experiences. We talked a lot about like feelings physically and emotionally, and so having sensory being feelings physically displayed is prevalent throughout the entire show. And like, Kimberly displays 3 out of the 5 senses just within her work. I mean, touch, sound, and sight. And I mean, we have like sage and Palo Santo throughout the space that I like burn almost every day. I forget sometimes, but like that sense of smell. I think that all I'm missing is taste, but I feel like women who are able to have a period understand what like sometimes that irony taste happens in your mouth. Sorry to get a little detailed, but it's a little true.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, the sensory experiences of all the mediums coming together, and like touch, everyone knows what like a blanket feels like, and this furniture too. So it's very leveling and very down to earth, literally. I feel like I could use a lot of that term, but not truthfully.
Nice. Well, I think we're gonna just open it up for some questions. If anybody has any questions for either Jenny or any of the artists, I think we have almost all the artists here as well who could speak to their own work. Yeah, I can give you the mic, or you can just, I guess, project. But
I think one thing that I found really, it's very cool to see all the artists in the space. Thank you all for putting this show together. And I guess I kind of want to leave the question open to anybody who is interested in answering, but I think there's also an interesting theme I heard being spoken about or kind of highlighted tonight, where it has a context about a womb or a sense of home, but then there's lots of this zooming out and zooming in, and the idea of, you know, having kind of a place of safety, but then, you know, there's lots of parts of the world that get kind of highlighted within that. So I guess, I don't know, if anybody has any thoughts on that or would like to kind of elaborate, if they have any kind of feelings on that theme within the show in terms of just this overall sense of like zooming out or zooming in, or kind of this sense of the macro versus the micro that gets, yeah, that takes place.
Well, I think when you have that sense of home, it's easier to explore, because you have that spot where you can go back to and revitalize and rejuvenate. And then, because if you don't have that, it's harder to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like, I do find that really inspiring.
Yeah, I think I touched on that a bit. I don't know how else to elaborate. I guess my reasoning behind the idea of the sacrum is just that tension between kind of wanting to return and having a safe space, but then being immersed in chaos or unpleasant, this world that is modern world. So I guess that's kind of where some of the tension is. I guess the Mommy Loves You blanket is kind of like unraveling maybe some of that context. Yeah, I love words of affirmation, so I just want to hear it, even though my mom never ever said Mommy loves you, but I want to hear that. So I guess some comforting things, like, because I do miss when my mom, like, she used to pay her bills because she's a single mom, and I would come snuggle in bed and she'd be like, here, write the stamp and put on the envelope, and I used to just snuggle with her. And I do, you know, it's like that mother, a lot of grown adults miss their mom too. You know, I still miss my mom every now and again. But that maternal love is important. But yeah, there's that tension there. I don't know if that.
That was a good point. I feel like I have a similar thought, kind of like. Okay, so one of my idols is Brene Brown, if anybody's heard of her, and she's a behavioral researcher who like collects stories and disseminates information to get to the root of feelings, human feelings. And among her studies, she has a really great TED Talk. You just search Brene Brown. She discovered that when you ask people to talk about a love story, they'll talk to you about heartbreak. When you want to talk about safety, they'll talk about some of the most unsafe moments. When you talk about security, you may talk about like moments of possible like insecurity. And so being alive, to be human, is a very complex emotional state of being. And there was not a way to approach the show without continuously circling back to, well, what about these polar opposite feelings that come up when talking about safety and comfort.
Well, and I think I'd like to also just compliment, in that way, I think you guys set up a really wonderful narrative in that way about how the zoom out orient happens, where it kind of takes you step by step in some ways, where it kind of has this living room setting. You have a vase of flowers and plants that are comforting. You have mommy's blanket. And then you continue to zoom out throughout the show to things that almost get to be geographical in context, or kind of elements of being fully immersed in nature. So, yeah, just not a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think, oh, sorry.
well, you go.
Okay. So I think like the multicultural experience, there's a lot of like zooming in and out and trying to like crosswalk these like totally different ways of thinking. So it's like part of like trying to embrace your identity is like, you know, it's like, oh, well, like here's this side of me. Like I'm gonna zoom out like through my other culture and look at this objectively, right? And then also like when you're connected to like a home that you no longer live in, there's kind of this like, you look at it from like a very zoomed out perspective, where it's like, well, you know, it's like, you know, my dad's from Japan, or my dad's not from Japan, but his mom was from Japan, and so it's kind of like, I see Japanese culture from this zoomed out perspective, but it is still a part of me, so it's like kind of like navigating that space and then like finding a way to like bring that into American culture. It's kind of like a really complex way of being.
A lot of daughters of immigrants in this show.
Yes.
But I was just going to mention, I know you touched on Kimberly's pieces before she got here, and I don't know if she wants to speak on she's here, but we didn't touch on like the nervous system of her pieces. I mean, they're literally titled Nerves, and I don't know why Jason's comment made me think of that, but yeah, there are aspects of this show, Union Hall, converted into a home, a living home that represent the human body, and I'm sure Jenny can probably touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I love the concept of nerves, and I love how she used sound to connect that. She sent me this article like when we first started this proposal, and it's like there's this like theory that like neurons communicate via sound, not necessarily like just electrical impulses, and so like I think that's such an interesting concept. And then she visually displayed that. But if you like, there was this one point in my life where I got like really into space videos. So it's like there are these like renderings, and it's like you zoom out really far, and it's like all of these like networks of galaxies. If you zoom really far out, they look like neurons, right? And so it's kind of like there's this like sense of home and body, like even in this like very, very macro scale. And so it's kind of like Kimberly's pieces for me like really like tie everything together, and like really became kind of the nervous system of this exhibition, because it's like all of the sounds communicate, and then it like visually communicates, and just like like when she like approached me with this idea, I was like, I love this so much. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if it's because I spent a lot of time here, but this like a home away from home.
Yeah. So like, what are your observations?
Oh, just like this sitting area possibly being the heart.
Yeah.
I mean, from the color to like the light kind of amplifying this centerpiece. I know the heart isn't really like the center of our body per se, but it feels like everything kind of focuses here, which is, you know, and then the external parts of the walls host the majority of the artworks, and in between each organ or organism being the artworks is Kimberly's nervous system to kind of tie it all together. And I feel like Emily's gates could be maybe perceived as like the skin, the forefront of our near human bodies.
Yeah.
I always spend a lot of time in this space.
What are you in the exhibition? Are you the brain?
No. What is the brain? I don't know, maybe like Kimberly's like projection definitely looks like just like firing synapses, doesn't it? Like, yeah. Plus it's circular in form, it's you know, the highest point of artwork. Yeah, I would say that one.
Yeah. Oh, so this rug is also like important because it's like it's a Uşak rug from Turkey from the 1930s, and so it's like a tradition that's passed down from like one generation of women to another, and so it's kind of like there are so many women that have like worked on this rug, and so that's kind of like a really important like piece for me because it's like everyone really contributed so much to this concept and this idea, and it's like this is such a group effort that you know, it really belongs to all of us, I think. But and so like that's why I wanted to include it, and it's like kind of like a subtle thing, but it's like, you know, rugs kind of like symbolize protection too. So it's like there are a lot of like motifs that are woven into rugs that like have protective elements because it's like supposed to protect this home and this family and like, you know, this communal sense. And so that's why I wanted to shine a light on it, because it's like, you know, like there are so many common threads, and so like for all of those to be like woven together and to like kind of like come up and like together in this way, it's been like kind of like a very like serendipitous, I think, experience. Yeah.
That's great. Does anyone else have any questions? I know we're talking amongst ourselves a little bit, but awesome. Well, I just want to make sure we have time for this last question, and then if anybody else has any other questions they think of, we can do those after the fact. But yeah, I just wanted to hear about any other projects that you have coming up, and also from the artists, if any of the artists wanted to share any upcoming exhibitions, any projects, where to find them. We also on our website have, I think we have like links to most of their social medias and websites, and on our Instagram they're all tagged, so if you want to find them after the fact, you can.
I'm gonna hand the mic off to Jenna.
Oh man. Thanks. I have a show that is down in Lone Tree, which is like a lot of paintings. It's pretty much every painting I've made since I've moved out here besides these guys. And it is at the Lone Tree Art Center, and I think they're pretty much open Monday through Friday, weekends, normal hours, 9 to 5. I also do really cool events sometimes where you can like go see a tap dancing company and yeah.
And then your residency. Your residency.
Oh, and I forgot about that. And I have a residency coming up this summer. I guess I forgot about it because I found out about it like 2 years ago, and then but that'll be down in New Mexico in July. So I'm excited for that. Yeah.
And then she's also at Redline Satellite Program at the Evans School.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I think pretty much once a month or so they'll do open studios, and if you follow Friend of a Friend, they'll have openings just about every month, and usually I try to keep my door open on those events for studios, and there's a ton of other really cool artists in the building too, so definitely a cool space to check out. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
and then Ari.
Yeah, you asked me that today and I forgot, and then I remembered. So in April, I have a public art thing in Louisville, downtown Louisville in April. But you can follow me on my socials. It's easier to keep up with me that way because I don't exactly know where it's gonna be right now. Okay, yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Oh yeah. What do you get?
Anyone else?
You can follow me on Instagram. That's Emerging King. And I'm building my own website. I'm trying to learn coding, so eventually you can go to summerteamking.com and you can catch my art in my bedroom where I will be sitting and painting. Cheers. Cheers.
Oh, was I supposed? Yeah, I just have some more like escapist travels. So.
And you can find Jess in the gallery Wednesday through Saturday, 12 to 6 p.m.
then Kimberly is working on her PhD right now at Boulder. So follow her Disaster Girl on Instagram because she does some really cool projects on DIY citizenship, and she has a project that was going on in Trinidad for a while. That's some really cool stuff. So I would definitely recommend following her.
Also, she's a newlywed, so congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Awesome. I'm just gonna, sorry, thank you. Okay, well, yeah, Sacrum is up through next Saturday, February 11th, 12 to 6 p.m. Wednesdays through Saturdays. And then this is the first of 3 Rough Gem shows. So then the Ultimate Boon will be up for 3 weeks, opening on February 23rd, and then followed by Against Nature. So yeah, we're excited. We're gonna be really sad to see Sacrum go, but hope that we see you at future exhibitions. Thanks again to our sponsors. Thanks again to the artists. Thank you to Jenny for all your hard work. We're just, yeah, always have so much fun putting this program together, and are really thrilled that people yeah, work together and put together such amazing work in our space. So yeah. Any other questions before we go? All right, we'll close it out then. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I just want to thank Union Hall and all the sponsors, all the artists, everyone that came out to the openings and the potluck and the curatorial talk. I mean, this has been such a community effort that like all of you are like such a pivotal part of this. So I just want to thank you all. And yeah, this has been a great experience. So
Yeah.
and then also, okay, so Jess like has done sorry not to put you on the spot, like Jess has done so much for the show too, where it's like I wanted her expertise because it's like she spends so much time in this space, and so like the whale walls are her idea, and like the vinyl was all Jess, and like just the subtleties of like the way it was shaped and the way the light went. So I just want to, you know, congratulate you on that, and you did a great job. So
She said he's
All right, well, let's do a round of applause.